does districting and redistricting play into that narrative?
Well, the district is the area in which the politician represents. And when you have politicians drawing the maps how they want it, they can draw that map in a way that advantages themselves. For example, you can have someone come in and say, well, these people that we want to support, they did well in these geographic areas. They didn't do so well in these. So we're going to carve those ones where they didn't do so well up to where their political power is disadvantaged. And so that way, the chances of these people ever having to face a competitive election or lose re-election is reduced.
So what is a district? So it's just a geographical boundaries, and then who determines those? Like, how does a district get formed or determined? Where does that information come from?
So the districts are the geographic boundaries that our state reps, our state senators are drawn up to represent. Of course, you have a similar process at the congressional level. You have similar processes on down to county and city levels for justices of the peace and city council. As far as state level redistricting goes, for our state representatives and state senators, those districts are drawn up by an apportionment board, which consists of the governor, the secretary of state, and the attorney general. And each district, for the House, each district has to have about 30,000 people, give or take. State Senate, I think, is about 80,000, give or take. So it's based on population. And they sit down, they draw the lines based on that population. If you think about it, if you're just focused on the numbers of people, then there's all kinds of different ways you can draw those districts. And if you're creative with the maps, you can disadvantage certain groups. You can give yourself an advantage. You can draw maps that are geared towards certain areas of interest, like a rural district or an urban district. So really, when it comes down to it, making the maps is a very important thing.
Are there rules that prevent what you were just suggesting, that, if I do it this way, it's an advantage? Are there rules set that these boards or bodies that do the districting have to abide by?
To a certain extent, yes. They have to avoid, for example, racial gerrymandering under the Voting Rights Act. But there are limits to what the law will cover on that. I don't pretend to be an expert on voting rights law, but I can tell you that in the past, and not just specifically in Arkansas, but across the country, there have been districts that have been drawn up that work to disadvantage minority populations, for instance. There's no restriction on redistricting for partisan gain, which has been a major controversial issue within the last decade or so. So there are certain factors that they do have to take into account, or that they are supposed to take into account, but there's clearly limits to what the law covers, and we have seen, especially in recent years, a lot of politicians across the country taking advantage of that.
Okay. So, Reggie, I want to get you involved in the conversation because you ran for House Rep in 2020. How the information that is gathered, where do we get that information from? Is that demographic information? Is that partisan, like by party? Is voter registration information? Like, where does that come from, and how often does that information get assembled?
Well, first off, the information is being gathered when they do the census. Every 10 years, they do a census, and the reason they do is because of the growth within the districts. The district that I ran in grew 1,885. The district that another young lady ran in, it grew almost 4,000. Excuse me. But for that to happen, they have to redistrict to make it equal or legal across the state because of the 3,000 or 30,000?
30,000.
30,000.
30,000 and
It's
the
30,000
86,000,
is
right, okay.
kind of the magic number. So if a person grew 4,000 within a district, then they're out of the law.
Okay.
So they have to bring it back into the law by removing part of that district, adding it to a district that has less people, which is what's supposed to be done. Well, but we also had an opportunity to piggyback on what David said is we also all had an opportunity to draw a map. Go to the computer, and as you move the cursor, it actually gave you a number. You could actually draw your own map, and basically what that was a pattern that they set that we could send in as a sample map that would give the, I guess I would say the people that are doing the maps, that are drawing the new ones up, it gives them some basis to go by. So that kind of helped set the rules. But looking at the maps that we see today, it's not even close to anything I've seen out there.
So there has been a difference.
It is a huge difference.
Okay.
And me running in the district that I had before, as they mentioned before, I had a lot of the inner city. I had the Bono, and I had Egypt and Cash. But if you take and encounter Walcott, which is totally rural area, you encounter Walnut Ridge, Cedric, there are no African Americans there, very few Hispanics. So it's a very disadvantage.
Okay. So hang on to that one because that's a real interesting point. But I do want to circle back to the process here in Arkansas. So I listened to a PBS broadcast of, from the committee, the governor, the attorney general, and the secretary of state that proposed the map and the districting and everything like that. But what was, Reggie said people had the opportunity. So when did that come about? And I didn't know. So tell me what the process was that led up to that, where all those touch points with the citizenship came about.
Well, all through this year-long process, people have been able to offer public comment. And there have been various resources where people could draw the maps and submit them to the state through a site. I think it's called fairdistricting.org. And again, the apportionment board, the state, is supposed to take any public comments they get in on these maps or on the redistricting proposals into account. There have been various, I guess you'd say, town hall meetings across the state where they go around and, a few different cities, and they more or less say the same thing, take public input, and then they, go on back to Little Rock. At the end of the day, though, this is decided by the apportionment board. And, it's one of those things, there's more than just the public comment that they're taking into account, for better or for worse.
So they're taking into the public, they take it into account, but they're not beholden to that opinion.
They're supposed to take it into account, and they're supposed to give, if there's a comment made on the problems with the redistricting, they're supposed to answer it, is my understanding.
Okay, gotcha.
And I want to add one thing, if I may. The only public forum that I was aware of was at a said location in town. So that's where we learned a lot of things that we're talking about now, that we have the ability to draw a map and submit it as public comment. So it's going to be important that they have more public meetings to inform the people as to how this process actually works. As David said, we're not experts in it, but I've been involved a long time, and this has never came up as such a great issue as it has today.
Yeah, and I think it's real important that people pay attention to organizations like yours, David, that address and are here to assist citizens with that type of information and resources so they can get involved, because we'll talk about this a little bit later. This impacts our daily lives, about how we get things done within our community, things that we want to address within our community. That gets done through local government. And if we're not aware of ongoing changes, and who our representation is, then we miss out on opportunities to really become vocal and share our opinions about everything. So we understand the process. We understand now that the citizens have an opportunity to speak, but they can take that under advisement as politicians. The board, this appointment board, takes it under advisement. How is it a conflict when elected officials get a chance to make up the map? It's like, I hear what you're saying, citizens. It's still up to me how I want to do it. How does that become a conflict, if you can address that?
May I address that, please?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to address that one because the first thing is, in this political process, an elected official is supposed to be my voice.
Mm-hmm.
You have an opinion, but based on the Robert Rules of Order, we base our lives on majority rule. So if your constituency want a certain thing, you're up there to be my voice, not to be the voice of your party, not to be the voice of your friends, but the voice of that community. So if the people are speaking out, I think that's part of the problem we have today is instead of the politicians serving us, somehow we've got it twisted and we've started serving them. They need to be more humble. I looked at a video earlier today on TV, and the lady says, I'm going to Washington, and I'm going to be your voice. We need that person back because now we've lost control of it.
Okay. David?
I don't think I can add anything to that. That was well said.
Okay. So on that, there's a term or terminology that I hear all the time and never really understood what it meant. Gerrymandering. Okay? What is that, and what does it, how do I, as Joe citizen, see if that's being implemented in my particular area?
Gerrymandering is basically the drawing of a district to advantage someone, a party, a politician, what have you. And the best way to tell is just to look at the map. And if the district is a really strange shape, 9 times out of 10, that's what has happened. You know, with districts, they're generally going to be, if they're drawn correctly, an area that fits together neatly, squares, circles, those sorts of geometric shapes. But then when you see something that's been gerrymandered, then you will just see these squiggly lines running through this district. You can see this with the new house maps for Jonesboro, where they've carved out different parts of the city. Like they put the north side in with Walnut Ridge. They put ASU, Nettleton, parts of the east side down with parts of Poinsett County. But then the one remaining area in the city kind of snakes around from the southwest side of town up, runs through the middle, and it slides up to this northeast corner. And it's just a jagged, snaky thing on the map.
Okay, so when I look at the map, geometric shapes, straight lines make sense. Anything that's kind of squiggly, I should call into question.
Usually.
Okay, so anything that goes ups and downs, dipsy doodles, and stuff like that. Okay, so when I listened to the governor, when they did this proposal, he articulated these points. One, we're not going to be able to satisfy everybody, okay? 2, we take into consideration minority groups, minority populations, okay? And that this particular map has in addition 2 more districts that address that are 2 additional minority-heavy districts, as well as the largest ever in this, I guess, state history of a Latino district. So as far as he's concerned, man, we did our job. Not perfect, but we did a pretty good job. And I have no reason to disbelieve him, but if I wanted to do research, I'm looking for a squiggly line. That's basically what you're saying. Okay. So he also pointed out that the information strictly based off of demographics, population, had nothing to do with party lines. Is there a pattern of voting from a rural area to an urban area? And when you start carving things up, is that where the advantage or disadvantage is?
Sure, and historically, of course, rural, more heavily white districts have voted Republican, and more diverse urban districts have voted Democratic. But more than that, you can look at the maps and you can see certain things the way these districts have been drawn. Again, focusing here on Jonesboro, the north side of town is heavily African American. That was, that's an area that, as Reggie pointed out earlier, has grown. The east side of town has a heavy African American population. Again, Reggie pointed out that's grown. What have we seen happen to those two parts of town? They've been put into districts that dilute their voting power. Just from a Democratic perspective, not Democratic Party, but talking about actual democracy, Jonesboro itself has enough people. We could have at least 2 districts drawn up solely within the city, but it's been carved out into these other areas. And not only does that dilute the minority population, it dilutes the student population because ASU has been moved into a district with Poinsett County that just comes straight up into the middle of Jonesboro to kind of ensnare it. But also, if you think about it, it's really unfair to people in those rural districts because those rural areas have their own unique interests that are separate from what we have here in Jonesboro where the city's growing. And, they have as much right as we do here in town to have their needs met and addressed. Beyond that, I can point out that this is not unique to Jonesboro. You can look around the state and you can see urban areas such as we have in Jonesboro. I guess you'd say the larger towns have been divided up this way. And for all this being said about, we have a new Hispanic district and, those focuses, there are a lot of districts that were, incredibly diverse, like the one that Reggie ran for, that have now been carved up in this fashion all around the state.
So we can understand what the implications could be on this one. But let's play devil's advocate. What does voter registration look like if everyone in those areas, and you are giving me the same number of people in the district that you gave me the last time, okay, then I've done my job as a board or a committee in redistricting. I'm giving you the same opportunity to collect those votes. Does it make an advantage or to a disadvantage when we don't have enough registered voters in that area? Or when you, like you were saying, David, I think, rural areas, their population is predominantly people of non-color. Does that change their party affiliation? So one, the number of voters, and then party affiliation when you split things up.
Well, districts are, of course, drawn by the census population. That doesn't take into account the number of registered voters within there. But you could look at the demographics of that district, and you could use that to disadvantage those voters regardless of how many people, even if all of them were to register. So that's a definite issue.
Definite issue. Okay. So where do we go from here? So they had a meeting. They made the announcement on the 29th of October. It is now open to the public for comment, for additional comments and pushback to the maps. How do I make my voice be heard? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, of course, you have 2 sites that we've given you that you can make public comments on. That's very important. So I would say go and make your voice heard there. I would say ask your local officials, the mayor, the county judge, your JPs, your city councilman, to pull them aside, call them, email them, and say, we're concerned about this disadvantaging us in this community. Speak out against this. That would be another way to go about this. Beyond that, let's assume that they don't you know, if they get a lot of negative comments and they don't adhere to it, and there's a matter of the law, say a violation of the Voting Rights Act, then, you know, a citizen might end up bringing a lawsuit over that. The state is setting itself up where there's going to be legal action done on this, you know, by someone. I think a few lawsuits are already moving in other parts of the state. So there's a variety of ways to get your voice heard. The most important thing is to get out there and do it.
Get out there and do it. I also heard that there was a petition that's going around that's being signed. Tell me about that, and if I wanted to find out about getting signatures, what's that effort?
I know there's a petition on the congressional seats because they divided up Pulaski County. And this, Pulaski County is an example of what's happening at the state level, where they took the heavily minority populated areas of Little Rock and they divided it into 3 different congressional districts, whereas originally Pulaski County was entirely in the 2nd district. Now there's a part in the 1st district, part in the 4th, part in the 2nd. So all to, you know, make sure that district is safer for the representative of it. But as far as, you know, at the state level, I'm not entirely familiar with that.
Okay.
But I would not be surprised that something was moving.
So I have a question. So I live in Little Rock, just like you said, in Pulaski County. I voted. Every time I'm supposed to vote, I vote. So you're not stopping me from voting. But how does the redistricting affect my civil liberties in terms of like who I get a chance to vote for, or how does that dilute the vote when I'm still able to vote?
Okay. Well, I can come at this from 2 different ways.
Okay.
The first one is, think about it like this. You and 50 people in your neighborhood, you know, are there to vote. You know, and as long as your neighborhood's together, you know, your voice is amplified. But say I draw a line down the, well, not even just down the middle. I can put you and maybe 15 of the people in your neighborhood in one district and 10 in another, and just carve y'all all up. Suddenly your voice becomes a lot less amplified than what it was before. And, you know, of course, we have one man, one vote, or one person, one vote in the United States. But the way that you know, things get done is you get enough people on your side. Well, if you divide those people up into different districts where their vote matters less and less, then you've curtailed their voting power. And as far as in the broader sense, this is the second point I'd make. You talk about how it affects your civil liberties. If districts become, if redistricting becomes simply about politicians maintaining their power, they're not going to care about civil liberties or any other issue, because the focus is just going to be on holding that seat. And if instead of, you know, having to face the electorate in competitive elections to keep their seat, all they have to do is draw the lines to favor them, what are they going to do for the people?
Gotcha. So in Reggie's instance, me and 49 other people were able to vote for Reggie because it's one representative per district, okay? And we're voting for Reggie because he represents my voice. That's my guy. That's my voice. But you just now redistrict me, so the same 50 votes are out there, but 25 of my friends, half of us that voted for Reggie, can't vote for him any longer because he's not in my district. So now I have to get reacquainted with someone else who may not represent me the way that I want to be represented. So that's really the big deal, because not knowing who your representative is in state government is really kind of like the big learning point. And the fact that now you can't vote for the person that you want because they changed the lines, that's where the infringement comes upon. Okay, I got it. Reggie?
And I was going to add to it. I have to continue to talk about the division that they did. having North Jonesboro, but the way it was carved out, I had Southwest Jonesboro as well. And the African American population from Highway 91 over to, say, Neely Road was about 60% African American. That has been added to the south portion of the district. What they did is added me, it says Jonesboro, Bono, Walcott, Cedric, Egypt. That's a very rural area with farmers. They all communicate. I tried to reach out to farmers before, never could visit with any of them. So for you to spread out even further, Egypt and Cache was a very small area, but they took one of the major populated areas that was beneficial to me and gave me two areas that are totally non-beneficial.
There's a disconnect.
It is a total disconnect.
Disconnect. Okay. I got it. So 1029, the proposals are out there. How long do people have to state their opinion? Like they've extended it for pushback. How
Can I
long
say something?
do people have?
I think that you asked a question earlier. There is a petition that people are getting signed in Craighead County. And I think we needed something like 783 in Craighead. I think it's 52,000 across the state. But here's the other side that I want to bring out as an issue. Let's say we get the signatures and we get that issue put on the ballot. Traditionally, who's going to the poll to vote today? Republicans. So the one thing I do know is if it's put on the ballot and it passes, you cannot contest it until, the next time they draw lines is 2031?
Yeah, 10
It's
years.
in place. The one thing about it, if it puts on the ballot, it's a done issue once it's voted on. The lawsuit, in my opinion, is the better way to go. A good friend of mine, I won't reveal any names, saying if we don't put it on the ballot, we can contest it ongoing. But if once you put it on the ballot, it's a done issue.
Okay, so let me get this straight, because this is what the governor said. The governor said, we're announcing this on 10/29. You have until 11/29 for feedback. If there's not enough feedback, then the idea, or feedback lawsuits, pushback, that by 10/29, they will approve the redistricting. So when you say put it on the ballot, he didn't say anything about ballot. So
Right.
what are we talking about ballot?
Right. Well, when they're saying put it on the ballot, when you sign a petition, you get a certain amount of numbers. Okay, then they can that gives opportunity for the public to speak. That's when it's put on the ballot for us to vote on the issue. That's petitions that they've did across the state for years, or across the United States. If you want something on the ballot, you get the proper signatures. Let's say if I'm gonna run for state rep and I don't want to pay, I can have a petition signed by the citizens, the people of the community, and I don't have to pay the fee. So that's an ongoing thing, but I don't think that's a good idea to put it on the ballot, because enough of us, and I say us, and I'm not talking about blacks, I'm saying black, brown, Democrats, it's not enough people that are going to the voting booths to even overturn that.
Okay.
We don't have enough people to do so.
As far as what I can speak to on that, I can say you're right on your dates. The end of the month, basically, is how long you have to address these issues with public comments. As for what goes on beyond that, whether it's on the ballot, whether it's there's a lawsuit, what happens from here, that's kind of up in the air. There have been times in other states. I don't know anything in particular about with Arkansas, but I do know that there have been times where state and federal judges have stepped in and they've said, okay, this map is drawn illegally. It disadvantages these minority populations or for whatever other reasons, and they send them back to draw the map. And there's been some cases where judges have just stepped in and said, fine, y'all don't want to act right, we'll draw the maps for you.
For you. Okay.
So, as far as what the future holds, who knows?
Who knows?
But the main thing is get your comments in before the end of the month on this.
Okay.
So the key factor is we definitely need our comments in
Okay.
because you don't have a case otherwise.
Okay. Comments in, get them in, 2 websites. Definitely support Forward Jonesboro or Jonesboro Forward.
Jonesboro Forward is separate from the redistricting process.
Okay.
That's focused on our city
So
council.
it's focused on city council. Okay, I got you.
I'd love to be back to talk about that sometime.
Okay. No, hey, look, I'm a big proponent of knowledge around local politics. Just because living in this, moving here and living in a small town, I've come to realize that if I have a pothole on my street or if I have something wrong on my street, that the president is not the one who's going to fix that particular issue. Mm-hmm. And so being involved and being aware of meetings, city council meetings, things that are on the agenda are super, super important. And we're hoping that, the Jonesboro Business Association becomes a resource where people can get that information of where to go and when things are happening. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time. It's been super helpful and very enlightening about this process, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for having us.